right, welcome back to 2X, the podcast where I share specific actionable insights that will help you scale your business twice as fast. In this episode, let's talk a bit about recruitment. Recruitment both on the front of outbound recruitment, where you are going out sourcing the right talent, versus inbound, where you are building up a brand as an employer that will attract the right talent to your organization. First of all, before we jump into the topic itself, do remember, and I really love this quote from Molly Graham, former Google, Facebook, and currently COO of Quip. Adding people doesn't mean that there's less work for the people that are already there. Adding to your team means that you can get your entire company to do much more. And to, again, quickly caveat and kind of hark back to the comment that I made in the previous episode in and around culture, do remember it is much better to be resilient and focus on being a cockroach rather than growing and scaling and trying to aim to be that unicorn if you are not ready to scale yet. That said, obviously, again, depending on your goals, depending on kind of where your business is at, there may be priorities that you want to focus on, and some of them may or may not involve growing or scaling. So if growth is the priority, then how do we talk about recruitment? How do we approach it? I would say, a few key main points to remember. Number one is follow the why. Focus on aligning talent with your values and mission. And the way to do that is not only to screen them, which we'll talk about in a second in another episode, but mostly to communicate your mission and your values. Because by clearly communicating it, both in your job postings, but not only that, through your website as well, and also if you have a team page, you want to make sure that it's explicit, it's clear, and really there's no such thing as over-communicating. So the clearer you make it, the more people who are aligned with it will tend to gravitate towards it. Second thing to bear in mind in and around recruitment as well is don't rush into it. Take it slow, right? It's really like the process of finding a spouse. So you're out there trying to find a candidate that is a good fit, because if you speed it up and you end up hiring the wrong people, the cost of a bad hire is a lot higher than you might realize. It's not just that you have to fire them and hire someone new, but that affects a lot of things as well, because if you hire the wrong person, firing them will affect your team morale as well. It might also affect kind of perception in and around like what is appropriate, what is inappropriate behavior. Why did that person get let go? That person could potentially do some damage while they were at the company as well. Maybe they underperform or they jeopardize a few key accounts. So you just need to be very mindful of those kind of things. So my general recommendation is, if you can, you want to try to have some form of what we call experiential due diligence. So if you're not familiar with the term due diligence, the idea is basically you want to try to test the waters, try to in some way work with them at some limited capacity in order to learn more about each other before you commit into the relationship. So see how you can explore some form of like a trial or like a mini contract where you get to test and see how they perform, not only both performance-wise, but also how do they solve those problems, how do they integrate and react with the rest of the team as well. On the flip side, obviously, you want to fire fast, because if they're not a good fit, then you don't want to end up in a situation where you've hired someone that is difficult for you to fire. Make sense? Because if they're doing damage, having them around can actually poison the culture even more. And it can actually signal to the rest of your team that you tolerate such behavior, which may not be the right thing that you want to put into your culture. So just be very mindful of keeping around the wrong people that are not a good fit. So where do you begin? As you're thinking about recruitment, the first thing to understand is you need to understand how you want to structure your organization. And when we talk about structuring, that's mostly in and around what are the roles, the responsibilities, and kind of the layers in your organizations? Do they have to report to someone? Who are they reporting to? What are they responsible for? Or is it such that you have created the flat kind of organization where anyone is able to do whatever they want as long as they are focused on their projects? And in and around that as well, there are certain organizations where people can move around in different projects as well. So my advice there is generally try to stick with what is already tried and proven, and then you can innovate and test different models that might work best for you, depending on you and your team. But try not to be overly creative, so to speak, with organizational structure. But the goal is just to really understand, who's accountable to who, what are their roles, what are their responsibilities, the decision-making process, who has the final say on certain things, those kind of things. And then obviously, if you are not already engaged with a HR professional or consultant, you want to make sure that you have the right legal documents in place as well. Your goal here is really to focus on hiring great people who are better than you are at whatever the task is, and also what we call A players. So you don't necessarily have to be an expert at the specific role that you're hiring for. It does help for you to have some level of knowledge so that at least you can screen them and vet them. But if you lack the expertise to do the skill interview, then what you can do to help is either you can engage with recruiters, or better yet, if you have board members or advisors that are expert on that topic, you can rope them in to assist with the interview and screening process as well. So that really helps. But beyond that, don't hire with the mindset that you're looking for people that you can manage, that these people are people who are that you can have exert some sort of authority or power or control over, because your goal is you want to be able to hire people that you respect, that are able to do an excellent job in their key area of responsibility, even more so than you are. And if you take the former approach where you're hiring people that you can manage, then you end up in a situation where, A players hire B players because they want to have some control or power over them. And then those B players hire C players, and C players hire D players, and so on and so forth. Eventually, you end up with an organization full of frontline workers that are all Z kind of players. So your goal is to try to hire people who are better than you. So don't be afraid to set the bar high and try not to compromise. So yeah, if you don't compromise and if you don't tend to fall prey to the desperate situation where you have to scrap by to fill the role ASAP, you'll end up much healthier in the long run, because short-term needs, yes, I understand that there are certain cases where you just need to backfill and get those roles filled as quickly as possible. But if you hire the wrong people who are the wrong culture fit, it's going to be more expensive to correct that mistakes. So where do you find people? Generally, the first rule of thumb that I recommend, and this applies very strongly to startups, but also to scale-ups as well, is usually if you already have a team, then leveraging the existing network is the first place to start, because if you have recruited people, ideally, that are aligned in terms of both your culture, your mission, and your values, they will, by proxy of their own network, also have people who share similar values and kind of that in relation to that similar interests, similar mission. Your goal here is not to so much look for that groupthink kind of thing. It's not about getting people who look and sound the same, but it's more so about adopting a very diverse approach in terms of cognitive diversity, but you're looking for people who share similar values and kind of similar kind of a drive in and around the mission. So start with your own network. That's the first point of contact. Beyond your own network or the network of your peers, then you're looking at things like, asking for referrals from your investors, from your advisors. A step removed, you can move into kind of the group recruitment situation. So what that looks like is usually recruiting from business groups, associations, meetup groups. The rule of thumb here as you approach groups is you don't want to focus on skill-oriented groups, i.e., for example, if you're looking for the developer, there are developer type of meetup groups that are in and around getting the developer community together. The issue is those kind of orientations, groups or associations, and they don't only apply to Meetup, because nowadays Meetup is kind of becoming an outdated platform. It's more so in and around just the group in general. You want to avoid skill-specific groups because they attract people that share similar skills, but not necessarily share the same values or the mission. And skill, in my personal opinion, is kind of the bare minimum. It's the easiest to vet for and screen for. What's a bit harder is to screen for people who are truly passionate about your mission and your vision. It's very easy for candidates to try to bullshit their way through an interview and talk about why they care about your values, your company mission, without you being able to clearly and authentically screen that out to see if they truly care about those things. So instead, you want to take on the approach where you're proactively going after people who already are vested in that interest. Make sense? So start with that. And then another approach that you can adopt is leveraging hiring from your own community. So your own community being your community of customers, but not only that, even volunteers and interns as well. So leverage that, because generally customers, if they are buying into your product or service, they generally already believe in what your company stands for. So that's a pretty good approach. I also find generally hackathons to be pretty good platforms to screen and find talent. And what is a hackathon? If you're not familiar with it, a hackathon is basically an event, typically in the format of a weekend. And what usually happens in a hackathon is that at the start of the hackathon, there will be some form of presentation or pitching where people talk about ideas or problems or opportunities that they want to solve. And then what happens is they form groups around the topic, and then they ideate. And from there, they do some form of building or preparing or research. And at the end of the hackathon, they generally propose a solution or do some form of a demo. There are what we call technical hackathons, where it's usually more common with the software landscape, where you have people build and do some coding over the weekend. There are also non-technical hackathons where the goal is mostly in and around ideation or around kind of the solution design, not so much about the actual build itself. Either case, what I usually find with these hackathons is it's not so much about actual company creation, because most of the ideas coming out of it don't actually land, and most of the teams don't actually tend to stay together. But what I've seen a lot of companies do with some level of success is either they do internal hackathons within their own team to foster that culture of innovation, or on the other side of things, do team hackathons where they're involved in these corporate innovation projects. That is both to solicit external ideas, but also to get a clear line of sight on potential talent that's a good fit for your organization. Because in hackathons, a lot of these people, they are working, number one, under high pressure. Number two, they're working in a group environment, so you can see how they interact with each other. And then number three, if they are truly passionate about the idea or the problem or the opportunity, they are self-selecting into it, right? As they form the team. So that helps you naturally kind of find folks who are more aligned with the mission and the values. And then through that due diligence process, through seeing how they work, you can get a better sense of, do they have the skill requirements as well? So those are kind of some general ways to approach more of the outbound kind of recruitment. More on the inbound side of things, how do you get people to both see your employer brand and also kind of better gravitate towards it? I'd say that the best point is really storytelling, right? As you tell good stories, as you really communicate both as an organization, not only to your customers, but also externally, because as you're communicating these kind of things, you will naturally also get people interested in working for you. You're talking about your vision. You're talking about why your company exists. And I won't reiterate this, but definitely go check out the video by Simon Sinek, How Great Leaders Inspire People, for a brief introduction on how to kind of view and understand the concept of the why versus the how or the what. And basically, focus on the mission, because people want to feel like they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves. People want to feel like they're a movement, right? In a movement. They want to feel a part of a community. And it's not just the salary, it's not just compensation that they care about. compensation is one component, but the other components that also bleed into that is number one, the values. Is your company doing the things in the way that resonate with them? Are they able to act with integrity as they kind of apply themselves in your company? And are they actually getting closer to their own personal goals as they work with you in your company, both with career goals, but also with their ambitions in and around fulfillment for their purpose? And it's not to say that everyone has a clear idea of what their purpose or mission is, but generally, if it's something that people can stand by, that people believe in, then that's where you'll find a much better fit in terms of talent, right? So if you are not able to pay salary, there are other creative ways to compensate, and we'll jump into that in a second. But generally, the kind of quick summary in and around the why, what, and how is to summarize Simon Sinek's talk. Most companies understand what they do, what they provide, and the example he gives is Apple, right? Apple, they have phones, they have software in and around things like the iTunes store. But if you look at other players out there in the market, Dell has computers as well, like the MacBook. Samsung has phones as well. To take it a step deeper, these companies generally understand how they differ from their competitors. So that's the how, right? They understand that they focus on different features, different elements. They're going after different target customers. But very few companies focus on communicating why they exist. And if you look at Apple, and if you imagine Apple communicating from the outside in, kind of from the what to the how to the why, then their pitch might be something like, hey, we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, user-friendly. Do you want to buy one? It doesn't land as strongly as if they communicate it from the inside out, where they focus on the why, then the how, and then finally the what. So the example he gives here is, everything we do, we believe in changing the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. How we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. That's the how. And we just so happen to be making great computers. Do you want to buy one? And you can see with the latter example, it lands across a lot stronger. So the summary here is people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. So if you as an organization do the right storytelling and you focus on really that mission and focus on being authentic about why you care about it, generally you will find that you will attract people who are a lot more excited by that. And that's great. So try to identify your business why, your mission, and really focus on communicating that in everything that you do. So the key things to ask yourself is in and around your employer brand, what do you stand for? Is your internal culture consistent with your external voice? Because sometimes in some organizations, they'll find that they talk about one thing, but when you ask your employees or once you start working at the organization, you'll find that what is advertised is very different from what is lived. So make sure that you're true to that. And you want to also ensure that as you're thinking about your employer brand, do existing employees and do former employees vouch for you and give a good testament to the fact that you actually live and breathe those values and those missions, right? Because at the end of the day, that's how someone who is evaluating a company kind of screens. The first thing that they will do is they'll go out on websites like Glassdoor, or they'll look for reviews, customer reviews. They may try to interview former employees or even existing ones. So you want to be cognizant of that because that's going to be what's front-facing for talent. So I'll end it here in and around tips for recruitment. Tune into the next episode and we'll talk a bit more about screening clients and the interview process itself.